Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future in Review podcast. I'm Berit Anderson, the COO of Future in Review. And for those of you who have never heard of Future in Review before, we run the annual FIRE conference, which The Economist has called the best technology conference in the world. It is taking place this November 6th through 9th at the Terranea Resort in Los Angeles, California, and we hope that you will join us there. The other arm of our business, Strategic News Service, provides its subscribers with the most accurate source of information about the future of technology and the global economy. So if you enjoy these podcast updates, you can sign up for the Strategic News Service Global Report using the link below. Now, I'm here today with Mark Anderson, who is the CEO of Strategic News Service and the chair of Future in Review. We do a lot of these podcasts together. He's a familiar face for any of you who have watched our other podcasts. And we are talking today about, he will be interviewing me today about my last SNS Global Report, which was focused on a little company called Otter AI. Some of you may be familiar with this company.
So let's begin, Berit.
Okay.
Otter, as you know, we've used Otter AI. A lot of people use Otter AI. I don't know how many, but a lot.
Yes.
And its claim to fame is that it is a really good transcription service, kind of automatic transcription of whatever your meeting is all about or whatever your recording is all about. It's quite useful. And
Very
so
useful.
Since you decided to write about it last week, what exactly got you writing about it and what did you find?
Well, so I'll start off with what I found because I think and it helps to set the tone for, and then I'll tell you
What did you find?
So after doing a careful review of Otter AI, I wrote in last week's report that we recommend, as a company, Strategic News Service recommends that you delete it from all of your devices, as we believe that there's a very high likelihood that it may be being used as spyware by the Chinese Communist Party. And its data policy provides little to no security around your sensitive user data, including the topics and contents of all of your meetings, which may or may not be being recorded with or without your consent. So that's the big picture.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And I think it's important to get that out there right away because it's important for, if you have someone on your team that's using Otter AI, they may be recording sensitive internal meetings even without them knowing it. So
right.
How I found this is because it happened to us, right? So we had someone on our team who was using it for meeting transcription. Normally, the idea is that when you attend a meeting, Otter kind of, shows up on your behalf, takes notes, sends them to everyone at the meeting, which is a pretty useful thing. But we were having a meeting with an external a potential sponsor for Future in Review a couple weeks ago. And this other person who was not invited to the meeting, their Otter AI client showed up in the meeting requesting
even though
to join.
They weren't part of the invitation.
They were not part of the meeting. They'd never been invited. They never RSVP'd. So it had somehow infiltrated our meeting system to show up in meetings that had not been invited to. Now,
warning.
Yeah. We declined that request. And in fact, we were speaking about confidential topics of information about a major, multinational company that has insight into a lot of different companies around the world. So it would have been a very interesting transcription to be based in Otter AI's database.
Were you using Zoom or Teams when you did that?
We were using Teams.
All right. Since Zoom is owned by the Chinese, I just said I'd ask that question.
Yeah, which we're using Zoom now. So it's not, it's no secret that, Zoom also has some issues with security and data hosting and data privacy and data security. Yeah. And we believe, we've said this in any of our public events, we do not use Zoom for private meetings.
Right.
That include sensitive information.
Yep. So this happened. Was there anything else about what you were seeing in your research that keyed you up to be suspicious of Otter?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One thing the thing that really kind of stuck out to me and made me think, wouldn't this be a perfect Trojan horse for listening to the thousands of secure internal meetings across every company in the US? was the fact that the person that we were on this call with said, oh yeah, this has happened to us before, actually, with someone else's team, where they weren't there and their Otter tried to show up. And so I started, we actually started talking about this at our team meeting. Evan Anderson, who is the CEO of Invent IP, and I started doing research about this in a team meeting, and we very quickly realized a couple of things. Number one, there have been quite a few people who have reported that Otter does not respond to cancellation, right? So rather than, even when they've tried to cancel the service or turned it off, it still inserts itself into meetings without permission. There was a whole thread on Hacker News about that. And there was another journalist who, this is a tool that's often used by journalists to transcribe information and interviews with sensitive sources. One of the journalists that we found who'd written about this had done an interview with a Uyghur activist, kind of public policy person based in DC. They transcribed the interview using Otter, and then the next day got a personalized email from Otter with the name of the person in the email, asking them to answer a survey about the nature of that meeting. So those are two things that right off the bat just kind of were like, oh, okay, this deserves some further exploration.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as you open up that Pandora's box top of it came without its own person attached,
Right.
Then any other thing you want to say next about how bad can it be would be not surprising, because just because you say it can't come in doesn't mean it can't come in. It's already in,
right,
basically. So it might be in every time you're meeting and just doesn't announce itself. Yeah.
It's possible. I mean, I think the way that Teams is set up, you can see, but
I think so too, but I'm not.
I'm sure there may be a backdoor of some kind where you could install a software program that would, by downloading the app or it could provide some kind of other access to your desktop, to your screen, to your keystrokes, all possible.
If I were the coder, that's how I'd do it. I'd make you feel like you got rid of it, and then it would still be there. Well, so what's your advice to people?
Well, in general, I think they're in doing further research on Otter specifically. I came up with kind of a checklist of questions, because Otter is not the only company that is being probably likely used in this way. And so I came up with a checklist of questions that you as an individual can ask yourself to identify, what is the likelihood that this tool may actually be being used as spyware by the Chinese Communist Party to access sensitive internal data about your company, about your team, what have you. And a yes to any one of these questions, I should say, does not necessarily mean that that a company or a tool is being used as spyware. But if you notice a pattern, we work in patterns a lot at SNS. If you notice a pattern where, like 3 or more of these questions have yeses as the answer, there's a high likelihood that it is. And if it's not, then that just means that, like, if this company isn't being used as spyware by the CCP, then they're just not doing their jobs, right? And the CCP does its job, right?
Yeah,
so they access everything they possibly can. And that's part of their broader global strategy. So the checklist, I'll read through it.
Yeah.
But so the first question on the checklist is, were any of the company's founders born in China? So that's question number 1. Mm-hmm. This is important because the Chinese Communist Party has demonstrated a willingness to bribe, infiltrate, influence Chinese nationals all over the world, regardless of where they're currently living. And they've done this in elections in Canada. They have, these rogue police stations that are located all over the US, or have been located all over the US. So this happens all over. They've also threatened to harm family members of Chinese nationals who are living elsewhere if they don't cooperate, or if they speak out, or if they bring too much negative attention to the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. So it's important to understand that it's not just about, some people might say, oh, that sounds like a racist question. but it's really a practical question, because if someone was born in China and maintains connections, familial connections, they are by nature of the way that the Chinese Communist Party operates potentially subject.
It's not because they're Chinese per se, it's because the system of CCP control, of repressive control, makes them a victim.
It's so pervasive. Yeah, exactly.
Both get to be victims. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question number 2.
Okay, so question number 2. So the answer for Otter to that, both founders were born in China, educated in China, and then came to the US and worked at major, graduated from Stanford and I believe Duke, and then worked at Yahoo and Google. So they have this like US bona fide with a Chinese national education background. And that's often kind of a tip-off that there may be some influence going on. Question number 2 is, do the company's founders have any past or present ties to the CCP? So do they have any history of working with or having business connections to the Chinese Communist Party or organizations affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party? And the answer to that question was also yes, right? So both founders previously to Otter AI founded another company that was used to, they basically created the technology that allows ad tracking based on where your phone is. So it's like tracking, real-time tracking of your phone so that ads can be served to you. And then they sold that company to Alibaba, right? So for those of you who are not familiar with Alibaba, major Chinese company, was relatively, I would say previously, relatively as much as a company could be, independent, and perhaps even was so when they sold their company, but has since been basically taken over by the CCP.
Yeah. Well, Jack Ma was hauled off to jail somewhere, and something bad happened to him. Yeah.
Yeah. So that all of their, the founders, their money came from a direct source over which the CCP has control. So the next question is, do the company's investors include any CCP-backed entities? And in this case, Otter AI is founded to an undisclosed sum by Foothill Ventures, formerly known as Singwon Ventures, which changed its name because it was taking too much heat, because it's directly tied to Tsinghua University, which is known to be a hotbed of Chinese espionage.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Is that your list?
No, there's more.
Well, there's more. All right.
There's 3.
Okay.
The fourth question is, does the company obscure the names of its founders, team, or investors?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, if the company isn't clear about who runs the company or who's in charge, they try and kind of hide that stuff. It's a sign that there may be some kind of like deeper thing going on there. And in this case, yes. There is no team page on the Otter AI website. It's really hard to figure out who their team actually is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take that much research, but it's clear that they're not making it as easy as they could for people to figure out who's in charge, who's responsible.
That's a tell.
With the exception of one, their CEO and one major growth person that they just hired from Facebook. So, and then the last question is, does the company have a history of making questionable decisions about data hosting and privacy? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is clearly yes. In addition to like the things we've already talked about, Otter AI has previously made a lot of confusing allegations or statements about who can access their data. They've changed their mind about that a lot. They've been really inconsistent about it. And finally, kind of like where they landed in an exchange with one journalist who was trying to interview them about it was, oh, don't worry, the only person who can access our data or provide access to external governments is our CTO. Now, as we've already talked about, CTO in this case is one of the co-founders, Chinese national with previous economic ties to the CCP. So the answers to all of those questions are pretty problematic, which is why we came up, like the ultimate recommendation was delete this.
Yeah.
Remove it, devices.
Can you delete it? Can you get rid of it?
I mean, I'm sure you can delete it. The problem with any app that's downloaded to your phone, especially, is that once it's downloaded to your phone, even if you delete it, there are specific things that can be included in it so that it maintains access.
Root access.
I don't know the technicalities of it, but there's a lot of.
Called root access. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've done a good job, I think, of describing all the tells. And here we are in the middle of this TikTok conversation. Montana's made it illegal in a bunch of states, 13 or 14 states at least, more coming. Probably the federal government will wake up someday and realize it should do the same thing with TikTok, but we're way beyond the TikTok moment, I think. And you're finding Otter AI. How many of these things are there? China won't allow any of American things into China, but we allow all of their stuff into America. And I'm curious, of all these spywares that are out there, spyware programs, how many do you think there are? And are there any others you want to mention?
Yeah, so one place to look is in the portfolios of Foothill Ventures, formerly known as Sing One Ventures, which was previously EEC Angels or something like that. And their portfolio includes a lot of major companies. So none of those companies necessarily, I would say, like, it's important to go through the whole checklist and do deeper dives on those companies to know for sure. But having looked into Zoom, I'm pretty confident that it probably is being used that way. Carta is also a major investment.
That's a really big, I don't know if that's been outed yet, but Carta is used by every startup I know of in America to do their cap table work, et cetera.
Exactly.
And now it turns out Ion Pacific and some other Tiger related, that's a real disaster.
Yeah, so we haven't done a deep dive into Carta yet to determine whether or not, I mean, it could be that was an investment that was designed to help them, give them more access to Carta. You can't know for sure if the company is structured in a way that actually does give them access without like looking into it a little bit further, but it's definitely something that is reason for concern, I would say.
You wouldn't want to know it, and now we know it. We just don't know how much we know.
Maybe that will be the subject of our next investigation.
There you go. Yeah. Well, so in summary, I think you're saying delete it. And are you making any recommendations in terms of policy in the United States or in other free countries?
That's a good question. I haven't made any official recommendations on that front yet, but I have definitely recommended that TikTok, especially, I mean, TikTok is just like a blatant play for, within the United States, given the like economic conditions and the global economic and military escalation by China and Russia and Iran and North Korea, I would think it would be kind of a no-brainer at this point that you shouldn't allow Chinese-owned companies access to US, the App Store databases, just in general.
Strategic.
That would be a good start.
Yeah. Well, and you coined a term in a recent GR that you wrote, Global Report you wrote about information sovereignty and the ability to have our own conversation per nation about elections or about leaders or about important subjects. And I think that all plays back here, that if you're being spied on constantly, there's a loop, I think, where they learn about you, so they know how to influence you.
I know for sure that the Chinese Communist Party has a database of information based on, everything that they can glean about people online, and specifically about people who are critical of the Chinese Communist Party. So you and I definitely probably have
we're in trouble.
Little bios in there. Yeah. But they're definitely aggregating information at a personal level about people in order to influence and undermine them.
Yeah. And I'll just mention, Berit, you broke the Cambridge Analytica story so much time ago, but it was one of the very first really big stories on misinformation targeting individuals. And here we are. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
well,
it's gotten worse.
Keep up the good work. I'm sure everyone's very depressed now, but that's our job. So delete, delete, and keep deleting, and then keep reading Berit.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about these kinds of things, if you want to be better informed about what to expect from the future of technology and the global economy, I highly recommend joining us at the Future in Review conference this year. It is going to be really an incredible show.
Will be.
So,
thank you, Berit. Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody else.